The gallery buzzed with excitement. The white walls were lined with paintings, sculptures, and installations that looked like they belonged in the halls of prestigious museums. Neon lights flickered softly above as patrons sipped wine, murmuring in low voices about their favorite pieces. It was a world Maya had only dreamed of stepping into, but tonight she was here, her work, her heart, exposed on a canvas for everyone to see. Maya stood nervously in the corner, twisting her hands together as she tried to appear calm. The stark white walls made the vibrant colors of her painting stand out more than ever. Swirling hues of deep reds, bold blacks, and radiant golds mixed into shapes that defied easy interpretation. It was abstract, yes, but also deeply personal. Her brushstrokes told the story of her life as a black woman navigating a world that often didn't want to see her. She glanced around the room, watching as elegantly dressed art lovers floated from one piece to another. Most of them were white, dressed in fine suits and designer dresses, their laughter blending with the soft background music. For a moment, Maya felt small, as though she didn't quite belong in this space. It wasn't just the wealth or the prestige that unnerved her, it was the unspoken sense that her art, and perhaps her story, didn't fit in with the rest. "Relax," whispered Aliyah, Maya's best friend, nudging her with a grin. Aliyah, ever the optimist, had insisted on coming for moral support. Dressed in a flowing purple dress and exuding a confidence Maya could only envy, Aliyah was already blending into the crowd, chatting easily with anyone who came near. Maya forced a smile. "I'm trying. This is huge, you know. I'm not sure they're going to get it." "They will," Aliyah said firmly. "Your work speaks for itself. Trust me, you're going to blow them away." Despite her friend's encouragement, doubt gnawed at Maya. She had poured her soul into this piece, The Weight of Shadows, she'd called it. It was a reflection of her experiences growing up, of the quiet racism she had faced in subtle looks, in unspoken words, in moments that chipped away at her confidence piece by piece. The painting was a visual scream against that invisible oppression, and Maya wasn't sure if this crowd would understand that kind of depth. As they talked, Maya noticed a woman approaching, her eyes locked onto the painting. The woman was striking, in a way that made immediately wary. She was tall, with perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing a tailored white suit that practically screamed wealth. In her hand, she clutched a delicate wine glass, the crimson liquid inside barely touched. Everything about her screamed effortless privilege. "Oh, here we go," Aliyah muttered under her breath, noticing the woman too. "Brace yourself." The woman stopped in front of The Weight of Shadows, tilting her head as if trying to decipher some hidden message. Maya's breath hitched. She could feel the woman's gaze running over every brushstroke, every color. For a moment, Maya hoped that maybe, just maybe, this woman would get it. But then, the woman scoffed. "Him," the woman said, her voice loud enough to catch the attention of a few nearby patrons. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes narrowing as she studied the piece further. "I don't get it. What even is this? Looks like someone just threw paint on a canvas and called it art." Maya's heart sank. She felt Aliyah tense beside her, ready to snap back, but Maya gently grabbed her wrist, shaking her head. She didn't want a scene, not here, not now. But the words stung more than Maya wanted to admit. She had worked for months on this piece, pouring every emotion, every painful memory into it, and here this woman stood, casually dismissing it like it was nothing more than a child's finger-painting project. The woman turned to her friend, a man in a dark suit with an air of importance about him. "Can you believe it? This is what passes for art these days. I don't understand how anyone would pay good money for this." Maya swallowed hard, her face heating with embarrassment and frustration. She had expected some criticism. Art was subjective. After all, but this was personal. The woman wasn't just mocking the painting, she was mocking everything Maya stood for, everything she had fought to express. Before the woman could continue, Aliyah stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "What exactly is it that you don't get?" The woman blinked, clearly surprised that someone had addressed her directly. "Well, for starters," she said, waving her hand dismissively, "it's just too chaotic. No clear subject. No structure. It's like the artist didn't know what they were doing." Aliyah opened her mouth to respond, but Maya cut her off gently. "It's okay, Aliyah," she said softly, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "Not everyone will understand." The woman smirked, seemingly satisfied with Maya's concession. "Exactly," she said, turning her attention back to her companion. "Some art just isn't for everyone. Maybe it'll sell to someone with no taste." Maya felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Her art, her expression, her truth had been reduced to a joke. But instead of lashing out, she stayed quiet, letting the woman and her friend walk away, laughing softly as they moved to the next piece. Aliyah fumed beside her. "I can't believe that woman. She has no idea what she's talking about." "It's fine," Maya said, though her voice wavered slightly. She wanted to be stronger, to brush it off like it didn't matter. But the truth was, it did. It mattered more than she cared to admit. Aliyah put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Maya, listen to me. That woman is an idiot. Your work is powerful, and one day, people are going to see that. I don't let her tear you down." Maya nodded, though the sting of the moment still lingered. She couldn't shake the image of the woman's sneering face, the dismissive tone, the laughter that followed her out of earshot. But Alia was right. Maya had to keep pushing forward. Her art mattered, even if not everyone saw its value right away. The night dragged on, each passing minute filled with whispers of excitement and the occasional clink of wine glasses. Maya stood at her corner of the gallery, watching as more people passed by her painting without a second glance. A few patrons paused, looked at her work for a brief moment, and then moved on without comment. The pit of doubt in her stomach only deepened. Her earlier encounter with the dismissive woman, whose words still echoed in her mind, had drained much of her energy. Maya felt like a child in a room full of adults who didn't take her seriously. Every time she overheard someone marvel at another artist's piece, her insecurities tightened their grip on her. It was as though she were invisible, her art unworthy of the space it took up on the gallery's pristine white walls. As the evening stretched on, she couldn't help but overhear the other artists and their conversations with patrons. They talked with ease about their inspirations, their technique, and the stories behind their work. Their voices flowed with confidence, filled with the certainty Maya felt she lacked. How could they speak so freely, so boldly about their art? Why was it that her voice seemed to disappear whenever she tried to share her vision? Just as Maya was about to retreat into herself completely, she heard footsteps approaching. Her heart quickened with the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would stop and take a genuine interest in her painting. She turned to see a man in his mid-50s, his graying hair slicked back, and dressed in an immaculately tailored suit. He was accompanied by a small entourage, each of them wearing the look of people accustomed to being important. He paused in front of Maya's painting, his eyes scanning it slowly, thoughtfully. For a moment, Maya allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps this man, clearly someone of significance, would see what she had been trying to say through her art. Before Maya could open her mouth to introduce herself, she saw someone familiar approach the man, Vivian, the same woman who had so harshly mocked her work earlier. The sight of her immediately made Maya's stomach knot. She instinctively took a step back, watching as Vivian sauntered up to the man and placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Ah, there you are," darling Vivian said with a soft laugh, glancing up at him with an adoring smile. "I've been meaning to show you something." The man nodded, his eyes shifting between the various works on the wall. Yes, I've seen a few pieces that are interesting." Vivian's gaze fell on Maya's painting, and she smirked. "But not this one, I'm afraid. You wouldn't believe it. But someone actually put this up here thinking it was worth displaying." She gave a short, clipped laugh and gestured toward the weight of shadows. "It's as if the artist just threw paint at the canvas and walked away." The man chuckled softly, but his eyes didn't leave the painting. He continued studying it, a small frown pulling at the corners of his mouth. He tilted his head, narrowing his eyes, as though trying to make sense of something beyond what was immediately visible. Maya's breath caught. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, but fear held her back. Her heart raced as she silently willed the man to see past Vivian's sneer, to recognize the meaning that lay beneath the layers of color. Vivian, sensing that the man wasn't as dismissive as she expected, leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Honestly, darling, it's not worth your time. There are so many other more interesting pieces here tonight. Why waste time on something so amateur?" Maya bit the inside of her cheek to keep from saying something she would regret. But before she could retreat any further, a voice spoke up beside her. "I think it's quite striking," said Alia, stepping forward with an air of confidence that Maya wished she could share. "In fact, it's one of the most powerful pieces here." Vivian turned, her lips pursing as she regarded Alia with thinly veiled annoyance. "Powerful? Well, I suppose art is subjective." Alia didn't flinch. "It is. And what you see as chaos, I see as a reflection of lived experience. This painting is a story of struggle, of resilience, of what it means to carry the weight of prejudice and expectation. But maybe that's lost on people who haven't lived through those experiences." Vivian's expression soured further, and she opened her mouth to retort, but the man raised a hand, silencing her. "No, let her speak," he said, his voice thoughtful. He glanced at Maya for the first time, curiosity lighting up his eyes. "You're the artist, aren't you?" Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Yes, I am." The man nodded slowly, turning back to the painting. "Tell me about it. What inspired you?" Maya's palms were sweaty, and she could feel her pulse hammering in her chest, but she couldn't back down now. This was her chance to reclaim the narrative that Vivian had tried to snatch away. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand a little taller. Well, she began, her voice soft at first. "This piece is called The Weight of Shadows. It's about the invisible burdens people carry, especially people of color. The expectations placed on us by society, the way we're often forced to hide parts of ourselves just to fit in. It's about resilience, but it's also about the emotional toll that comes with constantly having to prove your worth." The man listened intently, his gaze shifting between Maya and the painting. His expression softened as he seemed to absorb her words. "I see," he murmured, almost to himself. "Yes, I can feel that." Vivian, clearly growing impatient, tried to redirect his attention. "Darling, there are so many other pieces." But he held up a hand again, silencing her. No, this one speaks to me. He turned to Maya with a small, thoughtful smile. It's brave to put so much of yourself into your art. Don't let anyone tell you it's not enough. Maya's heart swelled at his words. She could feel her cheeks flush with a mixture of relief and gratitude. It was the first time that evening someone had truly seen her, not just the colors on the canvas, but the soul behind the work. Before he left, the man gave her a polite nod. Keep going. You have something important to say. As he walked away, Vivian shot Maya one last disdainful look before following him, her heels clicking loudly against the gallery floor. But her disapproval no longer held any power over Maya. For the first time that night, Maya felt a spark of validation that drowned out the earlier sting of rejection. Aaliyah beamed at her. See? I told you, Maya. They're going to see it. You just have to keep believing in yourself. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of the evening beginning to lift. Maybe you're right, she said, her voice steady now. Maybe I just needed someone to really look. Maya sat cross-legged on the worn wooden floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by half-finished canvases, splattered paint tubes. The walls were bare except for a few photographs of her family and a single framed piece of her work that had never sold. Sunlight streamed through the small window, casting a warm glow across the space. But Maya didn't feel its warmth. Her thoughts were too clouded with uncertainty. It had been days since the gallery event, and the weight of Vivian's mocking words still clung to her like a shadow. Despite the encouragement from Aaliyah and that brief moment of validation from the man who had actually understood her painting, doubt gnawed at her confidence. She couldn't help but replay the scene in her head, the dismissive laughter, the sneering tone, and the way her art had been so easily dismissed, as if it were nothing more than a child's careless experiment. Maya picked up a paintbrush, twirling it between her fingers absent-mindedly. She stared at the blank canvas in front of her, willing herself to find the energy to create something new. But every time she dipped the brush into the paint and hovered it over the canvas, something stopped her. The fire she had once felt the drive to express her truth was dimmed by the lingering sting of rejection. Ugh, Maya groaned, dropping the brush onto the floor beside her. She rested her head in her hands, letting out a frustrated sigh. Why did the opinions of people like Vivian bother her so much? Why was it that one person's cruel words could overshadow the kind encouragement from others? The man at the gallery had seemed genuinely moved by her work, but even that moment of recognition felt distant now. Her phone buzzed on the floor next to her, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Aaliyah. Aaliyah, don't forget about tonight. Art collective meeting at 7. You better be there, or I'm dragging you out of your cave. Maya smiled despite herself. Leave it to Aaliyah to keep her from wallowing in self-pity for too long. Still, the thought of attending the art collective meeting filled her with a mix of anxiety and dread. The last thing she wanted was to be surrounded by other artists who seemed to have everything figured out, while she struggled just to pick up a paintbrush. But Maya knew that if she didn't go, Aaliyah would never let her live it down. With a resigned sigh, she pushed herself up from the floor and shuffled to the bathroom to wash the paint off her hands. Maybe a night out with other creatives would help her find some inspiration. Later that evening, Maya found herself at the local art collective, a small but lively space tucked away in the heart of the city. The walls were covered in colorful murals, and every corner seemed to be filled with someone sketching, painting, or sculpting. It was a place where artists came together to share ideas, collaborate, and support one another. Aaliyah was already there, chatting animatedly with a group of artists near the entrance. When she saw Maya walk in, she waved her over with a broad grin. Maya. I'm glad you came, Aaliyah said, pulling her into a quick hug. We were just talking about the upcoming exhibition at the end of the month. You should totally submit something. Maya's stomach clenched at the thought of putting her work out there again. The memory of Vivian's cruel laughter still echoed in her mind, and she wasn't sure she could handle another rejection. I don't know, Maya said hesitantly. I'm not sure I have anything ready. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. Really? I've seen your work, Maya. You've got plenty that's ready. You just need to stop being so hard on yourself. Before Maya could respond, one of the other artists, a tall man with dreadlocks and a paint-splattered apron, spoke up. You're the one who had that piece in the gallery last week, right? The abstract one with all the reds and blacks. Maya nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. Yeah, that was me. I loved it, he said with a smile. There was something raw and honest about it. You don't see that kind of vulnerability in art very often. You should definitely submit to the exhibition. Maya blinked, taken aback by the compliment. It wasn't the first time someone had praised her work, but somehow, hearing it from another artist made it feel different. It felt real, as though maybe, just maybe, her art had the power to speak to people in ways she hadn't expected. Aaliyah nudged her playfully. See, you've got fans already. Maya laughed softly, though the anxiety still lingered beneath the surface. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially after the sting of her earlier experience at the gallery. But the encouragement from these fellow artists began to chip away at the self-doubt that had been weighing her down. As the night went on, Maya found herself easing into the conversations around her. She talked with other artists about their creative processes, their struggles and their successes. It was comforting to know that she wasn't alone in feeling uncertain or insecure about her work. Everyone here had faced their own battles with self-doubt, and yet they kept creating, kept pushing forward. By the end of the night, Maya felt a renewed sense of determination. She wasn't sure if she was ready to submit her work for the exhibition, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to let people like Vivian dictate her worth as an artist. The next morning, Maya woke up early, a surge of creative energy flowing through her veins. She spent hours in her small apartment, painting furiously, letting the colors flow from her brush onto the canvas in bold, unapologetic strokes. The reds, blacks, and golds twisted and merged, telling stories of pain, resilience, and hope. She no longer hesitated with each brushstroke. Instead, she allowed herself to get lost in the process, her emotions spilling out in every color, every shape. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt free from the expectations of others, free from the fear of rejection. By the time the afternoon sun began to sink below the horizon, Maya stepped back to look at her work. It wasn't finished, but there was something powerful. She could feel it. The energy of the piece hummed in the air, and for the first time since the gallery, Maya felt a sense of pride in what she had created. As she stood there staring at the canvas, Maya's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, not expecting much, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw the message. It was from Aliyah. "Aliyah, check your email. You're not going to believe this." Maya's fingers trembled as she opened her laptop, her pulse quickening. She logged into her email, her eyes scanning the inbox, and then she saw a message from a well-known art critic, someone who had written for some of the biggest publications in the art world. She clicked on the email, her breath catching in her throat as she read the words. "Dear Maya, I had the pleasure of seeing your work at the gallery last week. Your piece, The Weight of Shadows, left a profound impression on me. I would love to discuss the possibility of featuring your work in an upcoming article." Maya's hand flew to her mouth, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was reading. After everything, after the doubts, the rejection, the cruel words, someone had seen her. Someone had understood. Maya's mind raced as she read the email again, her heart pounding in her chest. The email from the art critic was short and professional, but the significance of it hit her like a wave. This critic was well known, a name whispered in the art world as someone who could make or break an artist's career. And he had noticed her work. The Weight of Shadows, the very piece that had been ridiculed by Vivian at the gallery. For a moment, Maya sat in stunned silence, her thoughts swirling with a mix of disbelief, excitement, and nerves. She had been so close to giving up after that night, so close to letting one person's harsh words crush her spirit. But now, here she was, being recognized by someone whose opinion could elevate her career to new heights. Maya took a deep breath and composed a reply, her hands still trembling slightly as she typed. "Dear Mr. Harper, thank you so much for your kind words. I would love to discuss the opportunity further. Please let me know a time that works best for you." After hitting send, Maya leaned back in her chair, her heart still racing. She quickly grabbed her phone and texted Aliyah, who had been anxiously awaiting her response. "Maya, you were right. I can't believe this is happening." Aliyah's response was almost immediate. "Aliyah, girl, I told you. You're about to blow up. I'm so proud of you. Call me as soon as you can." Maya smiled, but the reality of what was happening slowly began to sink in. This could be a turning point, the turning point she had been waiting for. She wasn't just some unknown artist struggling to find her voice anymore. She had been seen, recognized, validated in a way she never thought possible. The feeling was both exhilarating and terrifying. The next few days flew by in a blur of emails and phone calls. Maya had never been one for formal interviews, but the conversation with Mr. Harper, the critic, went better than she could have imagined. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, about her background, and about what inspired her art. He seemed genuinely interested in her story. And for the first time, Maya found herself talking about her process and her journey with a sense of pride rather than hesitation. When the interview was over, Mr. Harper promised that the article would be published soon, and that it would feature her work prominently. Maya thanked him, still in a daze as she hung up the phone. It all felt surreal, like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. A week later, Maya sat in a small cafe, nervously refreshing her phone. She had been waiting all morning for the article to go live, and the anticipation was making her stomach churn. Aliyah sat across from her, sipping a latte and giving Maya a reassuring smile. "You need to breathe," Aliyah said, reaching across the table to give Maya's hand a squeeze. "This is huge, but you can't stress yourself out before it even drops." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath, though it did little to calm her nerves. She had spent years creating art that spoke to her deepest emotions, but now the world would see it too. Her work was about to be judged on a scale she had never experienced before, and the thought made her feel both excited and vulnerable. As she refreshed her phone one more time, a new notification popped up. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the headline. Rising Star, Maya Thompson's abstract art captures the struggles and resilience of the modern Black experience. Maya clicked on the article, her eyes scanning the words. Mr. Harper had written a glowing review, praising The Weight of Shadows for its emotional depth and its raw depiction of the unseen burdens carried by people of color. He described Maya's work as a powerful statement on identity, race, and the complexities of living in a world that often refuses to see you. Maya's heart swelled with emotion as she continued reading. He had understood her, truly understood her, and he had put her story out into the world in a way that felt honest and real. The validation she had sought for so long was finally here, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Elia leaned over, reading the article on Maya's phone. "This is it, Maya," she said with a grin. "You're about to blow up." Maya smiled, though part of her still struggled to believe it. "It feels too good to be true," she said softly. "I keep thinking something's going to go wrong." Alia shook her head. "Nope. This is your moment. You've earned it." The article spread quickly, circulating across social media, art blogs, and even a few mainstream news outlets. Maya's inbox was flooded with emails, some from art collectors interested in purchasing her work, others from galleries wanting to feature her in upcoming exhibitions. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. After years of struggling, after facing rejection and doubt, Maya was finally being recognized for the artist she had always known she could be. One of the emails stood out from the rest. It was from a major auction house, requesting to feature The Weight of Shadows in an upcoming auction. The idea of putting her work up for auction both thrilled and terrified her, but she couldn't deny that it was an incredible opportunity. Maya hesitated for a moment before replying, but Alia, always her biggest cheerleader, convinced her to take the leap. "This is how you take things to the next level," Alia had said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Your painting is going to sell for more than you ever imagined. I can feel it." With a deep breath, Maya replied to the auction house, agreeing to have her painting featured in the event. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation as the date of the auction approached. Maya spent countless hours preparing her other pieces, attending meetings with gallery owners, and trying to wrap her mind around the fact that she had gone from being a struggling artist to someone whose work was now in demand. But despite the excitement, Maya couldn't shake the memory of Vivian, the woman who had mocked her at the gallery. She wondered if Vivian had seen the article, if she had realized how wrong she had been to dismiss Maya's work. Part of Maya wanted to see the look on Vivian's face when she found out just how far Maya had come. The night of the auction arrived, and Maya stood in the crowded auction house, her heart racing as she watched the bidders raise their paddles. The atmosphere was electric, the tension palpable as art lovers and collectors vied for their chance to own one of the pieces up for sale. Maya's painting, The Weight of Shadows, was the centerpiece of the auction. It stood on display, its vibrant colors and bold strokes commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Maya could hardly believe that the same painting that had been mocked just weeks ago was now being treated as a masterpiece. The bidding started, and Maya held her breath as the numbers climbed higher and higher. The excitement in the room grew with each new bid, and before long, the price had reached a number that made Maya's head spin. When the auctioneer called the final bid, Maya's painting had sold for millions. The air in the auction house crackled with energy as the final bid was called. Maya stood frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest. She could barely process what had just happened. Her painting, The Weight of Shadows, had sold for millions. The room buzzed with excitement, but for Maya, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. She turned to Alia, who was grinning from ear to ear, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Girl, you did it," Alia exclaimed, pulling Maya into a tight hug. "I knew it. I told you this was going to happen." Maya couldn't help but laugh, though the reality of what had just occurred hadn't fully sunk in. It felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Just weeks ago, she had been struggling, questioning her place in the art world, unsure if anyone would ever understand or appreciate her work. And now, here she was, a sensation, a success story, with her painting fetching a price beyond her wildest dreams. As Maya scanned the room, she noticed the faces of the other bidders, some of them clearly disappointed that they hadn't won the piece, while others exchanged knowing glances, as if they had just witnessed something monumental. But one face stood out among the rest: Vivian. Vivian was standing near the back of the room, her arms crossed, her expression tight and unreadable. Gone was the smug confidence she had exuded at the gallery. Instead, there was a glimmer of something else: shock, perhaps even regret. She hadn't expected Maya's painting to garner so much attention, much less sell for such an astronomical amount. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them moved. Maya could feel the weight of their brief encounter at the gallery hanging between them. She wondered if Vivian was replaying the same moment in her head, remembering the cruel words she had so casually thrown at Maya's work, dismissing it as amateur and chaotic. Maya's first instinct was to turn away, to revel in the satisfaction of proving someone like Vivian wrong, but something stopped her. Instead of gloating, Maya simply held her gaze, her expression calm and composed. She didn't need to say anything. The auction results had spoken for themselves. Vivian blinked, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It wasn't revenge she had wanted, it was validation. And now she had it. The days that followed the auction were a whirlwind of media attention, interviews, and new opportunities. Maya's name was everywhere, her face splashed across art blogs, magazines, and social media. Collectors who had never given her work a second glance were now clamoring to own a piece of her art, and galleries from all over the country reached out, eager to feature her in upcoming exhibitions. Maya did her best to keep up with the sudden surge of attention, but it was overwhelming. For so long, she'd been chasing this dream, working in obscurity, hoping that one day her work would be recognized. But now that it was happening, the reality of it felt almost too big to grasp. One afternoon, Maya sat in her small apartment, surrounded by flowers and congratulatory notes from friends, family, and even strangers who had been moved by her story. She scrolled through her phone, reading messages from people all over the world who had seen the auction and wanted to reach out to tell her how much her art meant to them. A message from a young artist caught her attention. "Hi, Maya. I just wanted to say that your story really inspired me. As a young Black artist trying to make it in a world that doesn't always see us, seeing you succeed has given me hope that maybe I can make it too. Thank you for sharing your voice and your art with the world." Maya felt a lump form in her throat as she read the message. It reminded her of why she had started painting in the first place, to give voice to the stories that were often overlooked, to create art that reflected the experiences of those who were too often silenced. The success was wonderful, but it was moments like this, knowing that her work had touched someone else, that truly mattered. She replied to the message with words of encouragement, offering advice and support, knowing how difficult the journey could be. Maya had been lucky to find her breakthrough, but she wanted to make sure that other artists, especially those from marginalized communities, had the support they needed to succeed. Later that evening, Maya received a phone call from the director of the art auction house. He congratulated her again on the sale of The Weight of Shadows, but he had more exciting news to share. "Maya, we've had several inquiries from major collectors who are interested in commissioning new pieces from you," he said. "One of them in particular is willing to offer a significant sum for a series of works that explore the same themes as The Weight of Shadows. This could be a major opportunity for you." Maya's mind raced. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it was finally here. But as she listened to the director talk about the potential commissions and the lucrative offers that were being made, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her of something important. Maya had always created art for herself, for her community, for those who needed to see their stories reflected in the world around them. She didn't want to lose that part of herself, even as the art world opened its doors to her. She had to make sure that, no matter how successful she became, she stayed true to the reasons why she had started painting in the first place. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said thoughtfully, "but I want to make sure that whatever I create next, it stays true to my vision. I'm not interested in just producing work for the sake of selling. I want it to mean something." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then the director's voice returned, understanding and respectful. "Of course, Maya. That's what makes your work so special. Whatever you decide, we'll support you." As Maya hung up the phone, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The success, the fame, it was all incredible, but it wouldn't change who she was at her core. She would continue to create art that mattered, art that told stories of resilience, struggle, and hope. The following months brought profound changes to Maya's life. She was no longer the unknown artist struggling to make ends meet in her small apartment. Invitations to exhibitions flooded in, with galleries across the country and even overseas eager to showcase her work. Interviews with high-profile magazines and TV appearances became a regular part of her schedule. She was catapulted into a world she had once only dreamed of, but through it all, Maya remained grounded. One of the biggest changes was the attention her story received. After the article by Mr. Harper and the high-profile sale of The Weight of Shadows, Maya's journey as a Black artist pushing through adversity became a focal point in many discussions. It wasn't just about her art anymore, it was about representation, about giving a voice to artists who, like Maya, had been overlooked and underestimated for far too long. Maya found herself at the center of a larger conversation about diversity in the art world, and she embraced it. She spoke out about the importance of creating spaces for artists of color, about the systemic barriers that often kept marginalized voices from being heard. It was something Maya had experienced firsthand, and now, with the platform she had gained, she wanted to ensure that future artists wouldn't have to face the same struggles. But with all the attention also came the inevitable challenges. Some critics, particularly those who had dismissed her work in the past, began questioning whether Maya's success was a result of her talent, or if she had simply become a symbol for a movement. The whispers were subtle at first, but they grew louder, and Maya couldn't ignore them. One evening, as she sat in her now much larger studio, a space filled with natural light, high ceilings, and canvases in various stages of completion, Maya scrolled through her social media. Amidst the messages of support and encouragement, she saw the comments that stung the most. Is Maya really that talented, or is she just the it artist of the moment because of her race? I feel like her success is more about people trying to be woke than about her actual skill as an artist. The words hit Maya harder than she cared to admit. She had worked for years to perfect her craft, to create art that was authentic and meaningful. But here were people reducing her success to a trend or a political statement. As much as she wanted to brush it off, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that, despite everything she had accomplished, there would always be people who didn't see her as an artist, only as a symbol. The weight of that realization was heavy, but Maya knew she couldn't let it define her. A few days later, Maya attended a major art event, a benefit gala for underprivileged youth in the arts. The event was a blend of art, philanthropy, and high society, and the room was filled with collectors, curators, and some of the most influential names in the art world. Maya had been invited as the guest of honor, and several of her paintings were being auctioned off to raise funds for the cause. As she moved through the crowd, making small talk and posing for photos, Maya spotted a familiar face, Vivian. The same woman who had mocked her at the gallery months earlier was here, standing by the bar, chatting with a group of well-dressed patrons. Vivian didn't seem to notice Maya at first, but then their eyes met, and a flicker of recognition crossed Vivian's face. There was no smirk this time, no dismissive glance. Instead, Vivian quickly excused herself from the conversation and made her way toward Maya. For a moment, Maya considered walking away, avoiding the confrontation altogether, but something inside her told her to stay. She wasn't the same person she had been that night at the gallery. She had grown, both as an artist and as a person, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Vivian, make her feel small again. Maya, Vivian said as she approached, her voice unusually soft. I wanted to congratulate you. Your success has been, well, incredible. Maya raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was going. Thank you, she replied politely, though there was an edge of caution in her tone. Vivian hesitated, glancing around the room as if trying to gather her thoughts. I've been meaning to apologize, she finally said, her eyes dropping to the floor. For what I said at the gallery that night, I was wrong, and I can see that now. Your work, it's important, and I didn't give it the respect it deserved. Maya studied Vivian's face, searching for any sign of insincerity, but what she saw was genuine remorse. She wasn't sure if it was embarrassment, guilt, or something else that had brought Vivian to this moment, but Maya appreciated the apology nonetheless. Thank you, Maya said, her voice steady but calm. It means a lot that you would say that. But honestly, you're not the first person to dismiss my work, and you probably won't be the last. What matters to me is that I stayed true to myself. Vivian nodded slowly, her face a mixture of relief and something that resembled shame. I'm glad you did, she said quietly. You've accomplished something amazing. Maya offered a small smile, but she didn't linger. She had said what she needed to say, and that was enough. As she turned to walk away, she felt lighter, as though she had finally released the last remnants of the hurt that had clung to her since that night at the gallery. In the months that followed, Maya continued to use her platform to advocate for change in the art world. She launched a mentorship program for young artists of color, providing them with resources and opportunities that she had struggled to find in the early stages of her career. She worked closely with galleries to ensure that their exhibitions featured diverse voices, and she spoke at conferences about the importance of representation in art. Her work continued to evolve, each piece a reflection of the story she wanted to tell, the stories of her community, of her heritage, of the struggles and triumphs of people who had been silenced for too long. Maya refused to be pigeonholed or reduced to a trend. She was an artist, first and foremost, and she would continue to create art that mattered. One day, as Maya stood in her studio, painting the final strokes of a new piece, she received a message from a major museum curator. They wanted to feature her work in a solo exhibition, a retrospective of her journey from obscurity to international acclaim. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, a smile spreading across her face. She thought about everything it had taken to get to this point: the rejection, the doubt, the ridicule, and finally the triumph. It wasn't just her success, it was the success of every artist who had ever been told they didn't belong, every artist who had fought to be seen. Maya knew that her journey was far from over, but in that moment, she allowed herself to savor the victory. She had proven to the world and to herself that her voice mattered, her art mattered, and no one could ever take that away from her.